My name is David Fonseca, and I'm a functional consultant here at Availent Systems, as well as subject matter expert and implementation lead consultant for our ServiceTrade connector for NetSuite. Today, we're going to go take a look at the job lifecycle process, which begins from creation of a job in ServiceTrade and ends with eventual payment through either system of your choice. The first thing I want to show us today is the ASTN ServiceTrade connector settings. A hallmark of this application is that every custom object, whether it be a record, a field, a record type, a list, everything that's involved in this app and that comes with the app upon installation has the object code and acronym ASTN. And what ASTN stands for is Availent ServiceTrade for NetSuite. And it's a good way, if you see ASTN in the field ID or in the record ID or anything like that, it's associated with our app. But the ASTN ServiceTrade connector settings is kind of the control panel for your integration. Over here on the left side, we have a bunch of NetSuite security authentication related information that will be changed either automatically in the background in the case of the authorization token or set once and left alone. Over here on the right, however, we have a series of different settings that basically govern the way your specific instance will be run. So it sets things like numbering, like pricing controls, determines the source of item costs, determines how your segments are mapped, determines whether or not you want certain things to sync between the two systems, what direction you want them to sync into, and all of these other things that we dive into at the start of every implementation. These can be set and changed as your business needs evolve. But that right side is going to be use case specific, whereas the left is kind of just, what keeps this thing up and running, basically. You'll notice when I click lists over here, the connector does have the capability to run multiple settings at once. Each one of these settings records is actually tied to a separate ServiceTrade account. Best practice is to map every ServiceTrade instance to a unique NetSuite subsidiary. And that's the way that will keep your data siloed if you run, have multiple different ServiceTrade accounts for different parts of your business and want to combine them into one NetSuite account. We do have that capability. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the project life cycle. Over here on the left side, you'll see a ServiceTrade window, and on the right side, you'll see a NetSuite window. The process begins when your job is created in ServiceTrade, and that could be either from a quote in ServiceTrade that gets approved by a customer and turned into a job, or directly on the location level when you're adding a job. Now, when this gets created, before anything else is added, it will automatically create a project record in NetSuite that keeps the same numbering convention as ServiceTrade. And this is very important because it means, if someone in the office and someone in the field have questions about a project, you'll know that you're talking about the same one because they'll keep the numbering the same. So ServiceTrade will overwrite the NetSuite numbering and keep that tied together. You'll see at the top of NetSuite, we have a bunch of the relevant information related to the project. So you'll see the customer, you'll see obviously the number, you'll see a link that takes you to the job and the service link. So this job link just takes you right back to the page we see on the left. And the service link takes you to the customer-facing ServiceTrade link that shows you a summary of services performed, any parts used on it, any comments, attachments, deficiencies reported, etc. This will adhere to any customization you give it in ServiceTrade. So if in ServiceTrade you have that on this link, the visibility settings, hide parts, hide services, hide attachments, whatever you pick, it will be honored in this link as well. So, and just like in other NetSuite items, these links can be put onto other forms as well, such as invoices. and be transferred onto advanced PDFs as well in NetSuite. So we're able to embed things like the service link directly into an invoice, or the job link directly into an invoice or a sales order, as your requirements deem necessary. You'll also see information like the salesperson taken directly from ServiceTrade and any service lines involved in the services performed on this job. Now, we have our job ready. We want to have our technicians dispatched and, they begin work. Over here, we have clock events. These are entered in ServiceTrade by our technicians as they're on their way, as they're at a site. All of those events are put in here and they push over to NetSuite. You have the option with our connector to either do real-time sync, meaning each time one of these technicians enters time, it will come over to your project so you can track things like work in process, or you can set it to where all the time entries stay in ServiceTrade and get approved in ServiceTrade and then come over when the job is complete. You have full control over which one of those you would like. But when they do come over, you're able to see them on the resources subtab in this particular form. There will be a drop down of time entries, and you'll be able to see that these come in as NetSuite time records. So each one of these lines will generate an individual time tracking time bill record. You'll see that I spent 5 hours here. That corresponds to this line right here. If you can barely make out the end of my last name, that corresponds to this 5-hour line over here. It's actually trackable via ServiceTrade clock in and clock out IDs. So that's actually on the back end of ServiceTrade, but that's what keeps the line association. You'll see a job cost hourly rate, and where that comes in is this is set on the employee record associated with this employee who is on the time tracking, and we map those during implementation. So somewhere on this record, on this form, you'll be able to see, this account's a little finicky, so I may have to go ahead and switch the form to see it in the custom. But you'll be able to see down below that $35 job cost hourly rate. And as our time entries start coming in, you'll be able to see our hours update. So you'll see there are 12 total hours, which matches the 5 + 5 + 1 + 1 that have been entered in ServiceTrade. And 10 of those hours are actually spent on the job, as you see by these 2 5s over here. Our system is able to discriminate between time actually spent on the job and time spent in transit. The in-transit hours are tracked in their own field called labor in transit hours. And these are both used in these job cost fields that we'll talk about here in a second. But as you can see, the total labor cost is the total amount of labor on job hours times the job cost hourly rate we saw on the employee record. That gets calculated in real time as these time entries come in, and those start to factor into our other financials. So now that we have time entries out of the way, we'll want to see how items impact the job. Up here, you'll see 5 lines of items that have been added to the job in ServiceTrade. As each item comes over, starting with the very first one, it creates a sales order in NetSuite. So you'll see a sales order here. It's a separate record, but it's still tied to the job via the job number. And this can work either on the lines, or if you have consolidate sales job projects on sales transactions turned off, it will show the job number or the project number on the header. Either setting, either configuration of NetSuite will work with our app. But you'll see each line generates its own line in the sales order. You also have it linked via the ServiceTrade ID here. So that's what's going to tell you that it is associated with a ServiceTrade line. You'll see information like the amounts, the names, prices, any taxes that are applicable, the location they're being pulled from, whether they create a purchase order or not, or are associated with a purchase order or not, any service lines, and any corresponding service trade warehouses. It's also got the service link directly embedded that will take you right back to the job summary page that we looked at a little bit ago. So as these items continue to be added to an open job, the lines on that sales order will continue to change and update. As the quantities change in ServiceTrade, they will be updated accordingly in NetSuite. Removing lines will remove them in ServiceTrade. Jobs that stay open for a while, you'll just keep updating and adding lines as more items are added. And in addition, you'll see a couple of purchase orders that have been generated, or actually it's one purchase order, but two lines associated with it. NetSuite has a number of different ways to create purchase orders. But within NetSuite, either way that you create a purchase order, as long as it's associated to a job in ServiceTrade, it will generate the corresponding purchase order in ServiceTrade for you to track as a source. So let's take a look at this purchase order. You'll see this purchase order was for our 1.5 gallon tank and our shelf bracket. Both of these line items were drop ship purchase orders, meaning that in NetSuite, the item record was configured to be a drop ship item. So every time it's used on a sales order, and by extension through our connector used on a job, it will generate a purchase order from the preferred vendor. So this purchase order was generated, and now it's being tracked over here in ServiceTrade as a source. So as you'll see here, the purchase order number that was generated in NetSuite stays the same in ServiceTrade. So your technicians that are waiting on parts will not need to be in NetSuite in order to have an idea of the status of their job or of their item. So as you can see, this purchase order has been received. So you'll see this green box. When the purchase orders first get generated, depending on how NetSuite is configured, this box is a different color and the status changes. For example, if you have an approval process where a purchase order is not released until someone from the office gives approval, the box will be gray and the status will say not yet ordered. And then once the purchase order has actually been approved and it was ready for, is open and waiting for receipt, that box will turn blue and it will say ordered. And then finally, when we fully billed and received the purchase order, the status will change to received and the box will turn green. So now that we have our items on the job, our technicians have entered time, and the job is moving along, we can come back project record and start seeing some of these cost numbers come in. So we see the total job cost is the sum of non-labor cost, meaning this is item defined cost, whether it's purchase price or average cost, whatever costing method you use that determines the item defined cost, that will be calculated here as a total of the cost of one of each of these items times the amount that they're obviously being included for. The non-labor cost plus the labor cost will equal the total job cost. And then all of this will be calculated against the invoiced amount when the job is completed and ready to be invoiced. Now, when we're ready to invoice the job, you have the option of either invoicing it from the sales order in NetSuite, meaning, there's the bill remaining button that would normally be here if it wasn't already billed. Creating the invoice in NetSuite will automatically populate the invoice in ServiceTrade. Or If you want to invoice using invoice job, creating the invoice and hitting send to accounting in ServiceTrade, that will do the exact same thing in NetSuite. What that gets you is this. So as you can see, the invoice has a NetSuite number convention, not a ServiceTrade number convention. This is something that we can control in the settings and something we would go over with you at the start of an implementation. You have the option to obey ServiceTrade's numbering configuration for invoices generated in ServiceTrade. There's a setting that the checkbox that you check for that. And otherwise, it will default to the NetSuite value, even if it's created in ServiceTrade. So this one was created in ServiceTrade and sent to NetSuite via send to accounting. So it hit NetSuite, took the next number in the NetSuite's auto numbering sequence that was set up, and then took this number over here as well. You'll see we invoiced all of these items, and those items were invoiced over here as well. I should point out that any fulfillment in NetSuite that's not done by completion of the job or by setting of a used on date, which are the two ways that you can fulfill from ServiceTrade, will be done at this point. And when the invoice is created, it will still be associated with that sales order and trigger fulfillment of any fulfillable item from the sales order. This generates what's known as an item shipment or an item fulfillment. So we have two separate item shipments because this one is associated with the purchase order for the two that were part of that purchase order. And then over here, you'll see there's a second item shipment 432 that was generated for the rest of the fulfillable items that were not purchase order associated. So those item shipments are created automatically in NetSuite, can go through any pick, pack, ship process that you institute in NetSuite, or be automated to go straight to shipped for some of those parts that come straight off of the truck or straight out of a warehouse directly to the job that are not actually shipped. You can skip that stage on the item shipment based on your configuration. And finally, the invoice gets generated. So on here, you'll see the items that we wanted to invoice still associated here on the NetSuite invoice and ServiceTrade. You'll see these match. And more importantly, you'll see that the totals, the 9288 matches. I've seen other integrations in the past where some folks, experience rounding errors, tax errors, other things like that. But our integration updates the ServiceTrade invoice with the NetSuite, with the price of the NetSuite invoice, based on the pricing system of record you select. If you select NetSuite as your pricing system of record, then a ServiceTrade generated invoice will hit NetSuite. We'll look up NetSuite's pricing that's set up on each item record, do that math, calculate the total, and push it back to ServiceTrade. Similarly, ServiceTrade will, if ServiceTrade is the pricing system of record, any price that you define over here on the invoice will be sent to NetSuite. NetSuite will obey that price, and then NetSuite will own the tax and calculate the tax using any tax engine that you choose and bring that tax back over to ServiceTrade. NetSuite has very robust tax engines that can go as specific as you want for the situation that your business is in. And so we designed the connector for NetSuite to accept those taxes and NetSuite to control the taxes, regardless of your pricing system of record. But whichever system of record you have, the tax will be updated in ServiceTrade accordingly. So you'll always have the exact same total. Now, I mentioned earlier that NetSuite does have the ability to embed links into PDFs. So if we wanted to print this invoice and have a better look, we'll be able to see this invoice with service link directly embedded in. We'll take you straight there. When it's emailed to a customer, you'll see there's 0 due because this invoice has already been paid, but you'll see the breakdown over here of every item that's on it. These are extremely customizable within NetSuite, able to pull anything that's on the invoice record. So the possibilities really are endless with these. Now that we've got our invoice ready to be paid, you can take payment in either system, regardless of where the invoice came from. Meaning, if you have an invoice that was generated in ServiceTrade and pushed to NetSuite, you can accept payment back in ServiceTrade, or you can accept payment back in NetSuite, and vice versa for invoices generated in NetSuite. So, and this isn't a setting that you have to pick one and roll with it. You can pay this invoice in NetSuite, and then the very next invoice you can pay in ServiceTrade without having to toggle any settings or change any preferences. So in this particular case, our payment was generated in NetSuite, and generating a payment in NetSuite and applying it to the invoice that we've just created will generate this payment in ServiceTrade with the same preference, with the same reference number as NetSuite. So your back office staff will be able to track that in either system. And you'll see the amount is the same here, and it's been applied directly to this invoice as well. Similarly, if you use NetSuite's payments and you apply to multiple invoices that are in ServiceTrade, it will take the amount that you apply to each invoice and apply them separately in ServiceTrade as well. So you'll be able to, you can take, big payments distributed evenly over their past few invoices for a customer, and those payments will be honored and obeyed in the same way that they would in NetSuite. So now, to close the loop here, I want to come back to our job and have a look at our project financials. And now that we've invoiced this job, all of these, now we've got our 9288 of revenue, and that comes directly from the invoice. It's the total amount of all invoices on the job. We'll see our revenue here minus our total job cost will equal our gross profit. We can then do some things with custom fields like gross profit per labor hour. That's a field that was generated directly into this account, separate from the app, that did the math between gross profit and divided it by labor hours and got us our 616, 28, and you can configure it, if you want gross profit per labor hour on job, for example, you can divide it by this. You can do any creative thing you want with these fields in your own custom fields to get some even more bespoke project financial reporting done. But this is what comes out of the box. We also get our gross margin down here, 79.6%. And we also have it highlightable as well. And so that's able to be pulled on reports and color coded on your NetSuite homepage, or using our dashboard service. You're able to cast it to a TV in your office or your warehouse or wherever you want maximum visibility. So it's a very flexible product and a very flexible integration as well. So at this point, I've kind of closed the loop on the job. We've gone through time entry, we've gone through item use, fulfillment, purchasing, finally invoicing and receipt of payment. If there's any more questions, you can contact us here at Availent Systems, and we'd be happy to give you a fully customized demo into this product's abilities and show you what it can do. Hope you have a great rest of your day and look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.